From WNPR, I'm John Dankosky, and this is The Wheelhouse.
President Trump is claiming he's, quote, totally vindicated in the Russia investigation.
There was a lot of details that kept dripping out, and it sounded really bad. And when I actually saw it, it was even worse than I could have possibly imagined.
But I guess I would bet against the White House saying what it said with the Republican memo, which was 100% it's going out. I think we're going to see some noise. I think we're going to see some obstacles.
The S&P 500 has lost $1 trillion in market cap in February. This in just its third trading session of the month.
The difference between 690 and 1.8 million were the people that some would say were too afraid to sign up. Others would say were too lazy to get off their asses, but they didn't sign up.
They were like death and un-American. Un-American. Somebody said treasonous. I mean, yeah, I guess why not?
Indeed. Yeah, why not? Why not treasonous? That's the motto of the Wheelhouse today. I don't even understand a lot of what was just said there in that montage. I couldn't even place some of those quotes. But anyway, this is the Wheelhouse. I'm Colin McEnroe. Ordinarily, of course, John Dankosky is the first voice that you hear on the Wheelhouse. The basic story is that he and his wife, Jen, for a long time have been very accomplished at the amateur level ice dancers. And that's not inherently risible. And so although they never really rose to the Olympic level, it's kind of a tradition for them to go to JFK on the day that the ice dancing team leaves for the Olympics and bid them farewell. So although I notice also that this all just happened to happen when a tsunami was headed toward I think they're fleeing the tsunami. At least that's another possibility. You can join the conversation. I'm going to tell you who the conversation's with in just a second at 860-275-7266. Don't laugh at me. I'm not good at this. I admit I'm not good at this. And so let me tell you who's here. Mark Pasniokis, Capitol Bureau Chief at the Connecticut Mirror. Suzanne Bates, Policy Director at the Yankee Institute. And Dan Clow, lawyer in Hartford, recording artist. He blogs at appealinglybrief.com, and he's the Executive Director of Connecticut Citizens for Suburban Bear Hunting. So
my latest.
He wants to get out there and start shooting at bears in West Hartford. All right, so we are going to talk about we're going to begin by talking about the governor's budget address. We already have a little preview of it. If it seems like, wow, this is just coming up so fast again, like a year goes by so fast. Well, it doesn't go by so fast. It just took them a really long time to pass the budget. And there's a pretty good chance that if your child is in third grade right now, your child may be in fourth grade by the time they deal with this set of problems. So Paz, give us in general, in terms of the salient issues that are already on the table. Well, maybe we should begin by saying this. Correct me if I'm wrong. This should be viewed as the first move in a long chess game as opposed to a set of ideas and policies that will have some kind of permanence in our debate.
God, that's beautiful. A long chess game. Look, this is going to be a couple things. For one thing, it's going to be the start of Governor Malloy's long goodbye. It's his final year. The governor is not the wistful type. I don't think anybody's expecting him to do a Douglas MacArthur impression and promise to just fade away. So I think he's going to kick off the session with a list of things he hopes to do his final year and put them in the context of accomplishments from years past. And given that he's at 24% in the polls, I think some people were going to say, what has he done? Well, I think he's going to tell us today or remind us. Beyond that, these sessions are the speed dating session. It's a 3-month session. Everybody's goal is to get out on time, to have a budget done. The advantage this year, it's the second year of a 2-year budget, so technically they don't have to do anything. If they don't do anything, there's going to be, you're going to end the year with a $250 million hole in it, give or take. But they really are hell-bent on getting out on May 9th. The nominating conventions start 2 days later with the Republicans and then the Democrats a week later. So we're going to blink, and it's going to be the summer, and we're going to be hip-deep in campaigns. So I think this session is it's going to go by very fast. The Democrats
promises.
Well, I know. Well, I know. I mean, I still have PTSD from last year. But the Democrats yesterday, for the first time in a while, the House and Senate Democrats were singing from the same hymn book, and that's a very progressive hymn book. It was their values agenda, and
This is the new boldness.
the new boldness.
Yeah.
Yes, it's like coffee. It won't keep you up, but it is bolder.
All right. Well, I will come back to the new boldness. I want to hear a little bit more about this. But Suzanne, I think to maybe build on what Pat was just saying, when we behold the process that is about to unfold, and at least based on prior experience, it's not the kind of binary way that we think about politics, right? The Republicans want one thing, the Democrats want another. There are at least 3 different schools of thought because Governor Malloy's school of thought is very different from the Democratic majority. And there may be more. I mean, I don't know. How ultimately, given how fragmented things are, I mean, are at least the caucuses reasonably united? Are there basically going to be 3 different ways of thinking about all these things, or are there going to be like 10?
Well, that was the big headline from last year, was that the Democratic caucus, both in the Senate and the House, were very fractured. And so will they be united behind a plan? There's some very controversial things coming up, both in the governor's proposal and that leadership in the House and Senate have said that they wanted to propose, including tolls. There really hasn't been a big sort of concerted effort on the behalf of people who don't want tolls in this state. I think you're going to see that start to rise. And, there are a lot of tax increases in the governor's proposal, sweeps away from the municipalities. It's nice. People maybe, in theory, I'm willing to have more revenue, but when you actually look at what it's going to do to your monthly budget, maybe not so much, right?
When you say that there hasn't been a concerted effort by people who oppose tolls, are you suggesting that there will now be some united coalition with some kind of name or something like that? Well, no, I don't. There might be.
No,
that's the way things
not
work,
that I
right?
know of. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I do think that as it becomes closer to being a reality, you're going to see just right. I mean, in theory, there was this idea that tolls, we're going to charge all the people from Massachusetts driving through our state. I still see this sort of mistaken belief that we're just going to have tolls on the borders. But as we start talking about the actual nuts and bolts of, there's going to be tolls on every federal road in Connecticut, right? The 84, the 91, the 95, they're going to be tolls periodically. Everyone's going to be paying to go to work every day. What does that mean for your family's budget? When you start talking about it on like a family, or household level, what that impact is going to be, I think you're going to start to see public opinion change on this issue. So, I do think that as it becomes closer to being a reality, some of these questions need to be answered about how this is actually going to be implemented.
Well, I mean, I think Dan Clow would agree to oppose tolls if you would let him shoot bears. But
coyotes.
Fair trade-off, right?
This is the problem with any kind of budget shortfall. Everybody wants to die. Everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody wants to die. This money has to come from somewhere, right?
It's gotta
all
come
kinds
from
of
somewhere.
all kinds of proposals. I mean, I don't know. Do you buy her argument that when people really start thinking about tolls, they're going to get mad?
Well, there's certainly a very significant element of truth to it. I mean, there's no question that people are going to wonder how it's going to affect their pocketbooks. But I would have thought the Yankee Institute would support tolls, particularly congestion pricing, since it's an effort to use market forces to address a problem. And we need the revenue. We need to fix our infrastructure. Everybody, all the states around us have tolls: New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. And I think that at the end of the day, we're going to have tolls, and the reasonable disputes will be over where they're placed, what the pricing is, and how it affects people who travel in and out of the state versus strictly intrastate.
There's a philosophical divide here about how you raise revenue. I mean, there's basically kind of 2 ways to raise revenue. One of them is you raise it from the people who are using something.
Correct.
So the Current has an editorial today saying, no, raise the cigarette tax even higher, because it only affects people who smoke cigarettes. So good, let them pay for, let them pay money for that. Tolls, you can sort of say, well, you're charging the people who use the roads a lot. You're not charging the people who don't use the roads. There's some kind of sense of justice in that. But then the other part of this is it winds up being death by 1,000 cuts, right? I mean,
Sure.
There's a whole other school of thought that says, just tell us what government costs. and then we'll have like a graduated income tax and maybe one or two other things, and then we'll pay for it. We won't be dealing with all this diddly squat stuff all the time.
That's true, although the two are not mutually exclusive. All right. I mean, the problem is that over the past several years, I think the sentiment in Connecticut, for reasons that are completely understandable, has been no more taxes, no more revenue. We have to do all the work on the decreasing the spending side. And after a long period of growth in government and pensions that are exploding, there's a lot of sense to that. But when you get dogmatic about it and you abjectly refuse to consider anything on the revenue side, I don't think that's a healthy long-term way to address our overall problems.
Paz, is it? I mean, typically what happens is that there's no big fix. I mean, if there's and there may not be a big enough problem to warrant a big fix in a short session. But I mean, is there are tolls going to be kind of the blood on the ice issue, or is there something else that's going to be?
There hasn't been a big fix since the income tax in 1991. I mean, that was the last time it was like, oh, okay, if we can do that, we're done. This is a bunch of smaller stuff. Now, tolls are another category because it's not a fix for the current budget. It's a question of getting revenue back into the Special Transportation Fund, which is how we finance long-term improvements to transportation infrastructure. And there is a lot of reason for why Connecticut taxpayers are very skeptical about tolls and other revenue enhancements because this state has been irresponsible in diverting money. That's a real thing.
You got pointed at by Suzanne in
well,
I think a favorable way. That was a yes point.
I'm living. Yes, I just got a nice smile from Suzanne. But that's not just a Yankee Institute talking point. So this fall on the ballot, there is a constitutional amendment, the so-called lockbox for transportation. So the question is, will that make people more confident that if we do enact tolls, that it will go for the right purposes? So that's one issue. I am still skeptical this year as to whether it happens. I think tolls are a longer conversation, that there is a growing realization that there is a need for revenue to go into the Special Transportation Fund, or major and minor transportation projects will be indefinitely delayed, that fares on Metro North and on buses will go up. But that may take more than a session or two. And let's face it, the legislators are not at their boldest.
You just said they're going to be bold.
Their values are bold. You know how I read values? They're not. Proposals are something they hope to pass. Values are something they go over drinks. We're going to talk about this.
So they're bold at the press conference, but not bold when they push the buttons.
Right. And look, the numbers have not changed. It's still a 50-50 Senate, and the Democrats have, if they lose 4 votes on anything, they're not in charge in the House. So that's not a good recipe for bold, particularly progressive bold.
All right. So what are the Republicans going to roll out?
Well, so if I can just quickly on the user fee issue, I mean, tolls as a user fee are not a bad thing, right? But I think this, going back to the complaint of many people who talk about these revenue enhancements is, you can't talk about adding new revenue into a system that's just going to keep growing and growing and growing, and you're going to have to keep adding new revenue all the time. You have to get out some of those cost drivers. If you're going to ask people for more money, fix the problems. And that's the issue when I look at the governor's budget proposal. He wants to add new revenue and kind of shift things around and elongate pension payments, for teachers' pensions, but he's not really getting at the root of the problem.
What is the root of the problem?
Yeah.
So the root of the problem is the way we deal with our public sector labor unions in Connecticut. We're at a disadvantage before we even come to the bargaining table. And that's when you compare us to even our surrounding states. We have more expensive collective bargaining, more expansive binding arbitration. All of those laws that we have in Connecticut are more expansive and put us at a disadvantage every time we come to the table, which leads to high infrastructure costs, which leads to budgets that are out of control. All of these things are driving all of these long-term costs.
But because they're long-term contracts, they're very hard to fix, too.
Yeah, I agree completely with Suzanne that the data shows that what we pay our state employees relative to other states and their pensions relative to other states gets a premium. But the real problem, I think, is that for more than 60 years, we have not funded our government pension plans. And it's like a balloon mortgage. It's all coming due now. It's not this governor's fault. It wasn't Governor Rell's fault particularly. It's the accumulation of lousy management by the legislature for 60 years, and the bills due, and it squeezes out all other forms of discretionary spending.
How come you didn't point at him? You didn't give him a nice point.
Well, I think there's something to that, but other states also didn't pay into their pension funds. I mean, most pension funds were pay as you go for a long time, but Connecticut continued to do that. And then we also had these, high expected returns. I mean, there's so many problems built in.
Agreed.
But really, the root is how we negotiate, and we're at a disadvantage. The state taxpayers are at a disadvantage before we even come to the bargaining table.
All right, we have to go to break here. I do want to say that we are fortunate to have in our midst our friends from CTN. They are here recording today's show for future broadcast. I think we're going to be preempting CTN's new comedy, That's So Fasano, which I actually think is very funny. It's terrific. I haven't watched Better Call Paul, which is about a senator running for attorney general, but it's the new Paul Doyle dramedy. All right, we're going to take a little break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about other kinds of wackiness. We're back with the Wheelhouse. In the house is Mark Pazniokis, Capitol Bureau Chief, Connecticut Mirror, Suzanne Bates, Policy Director at the Yankee Institute, and Grizzly Dan Clow, lawyer in Hartford, blogs at appealinglybrief.com, head of Connecticut Citizens for Suburban Bear Hunting. There is actually no such organization, I should say. So don't.
There will be.
Yeah, don't send in any checks or anything just yet, or hate mail or anything like that. But there may be bear hunting in the. Maybe could be a bill. I don't know how they do that. Actually,
it was a bill. It was a bill last time.
But they can't do it because well, never mind. That's too in the weeds.
Yeah.
But we should talk about. So one of the things that Connecticut could conceivably do is react to ways in which the recently passed federal tax package is punitive to states like Connecticut, particularly punitive to states that have relatively high state and local tax burdens. So there's one, I would say, somewhat wacky proposal making the rounds. Paz, do you feel able to explain the charitable donation concept?
Only superficially.
Okay.
So one consequence of the Fed saying they're going to simplify your taxes is they're going to make them really complicated potentially here. So the theory is if you take SALT, the shorthand for
strategic arms limitation.
Yeah, I know. Every time I see that, I think, oh my God, I'm going to get a tax deduction for my missiles. No, for state and local taxes, SALT. So if you itemize right now, you can write off, what you pay here. And in a lot of blue states, I'm sure it was just a coincidence. That's a big deal. So the theory is if the municipalities create nonprofits by which they offer municipal services in lieu of paying your taxes that are no longer tax deductible on your federal return, you can make a charitable deduction. Now, there are many questions about this that I have. If it's really just changing a tax to a deduction, is it truly charitable?
The SLIFCO fund.
Trust you, you're not the only one. The commissioner of the IRS is asking the very same question in Washington right now.
Yeah, so the question is, will the state actually do it, or will you spend all this time working on it only to have Congress and the IRS go, nice try, guys?
Yeah, I don't know. We've got a lawyer here.
Not a tax lawyer, though. Not a tax lawyer.
No, but like laws and stuff.
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, this is, regardless of the legal issue, this is a serious effort by a number of states. I mean, from the day that the federal tax bill passed, we've seen California, Governor Brown there, and in New York with Governor Cuomo. We've heard talk from New Jersey and obviously here in Connecticut. Basically, blue states that rely heavily on property taxes to do their government, and they were seriously hurt. In fact, there's a federal lawsuit that's going to be filed. Connecticut's going to be part of it that argues that the federal tax bill unconstitutionally targeted blue states that didn't support Trump And the merits of that lawsuit we can discuss for another day. So we need to take the challenge here seriously. And what the governor is proposing is what a number of other states are considering as well, which is is it possible to use charitable donations to municipalities to offset, traditional property taxes? And they can try, and then there'll be serious pushback from the IRS. And I suspect at the end of the day, the IRS will not allow this. But as I said, I'm not a tax lawyer.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Does the Yankee Policy Institute have a well-crafted position on this? It's kind of a new idea.
I think it's a very interesting battle because look, you've got a tax with the SALT deductibility issue. You've got a tax code that is now more progressive, right? People who take SALT deductions tend to be very high-income people. So now you've got sort of these very blue state governors who are Democrats pushing against something that's increasing the progressivity of the tax code. And it doesn't hurt the state. It hurts taxpayers in the state who are going to end up paying more in taxes. The state coffers don't change. But I mean, it's funny because the state's saying, well, people might move out because of these, the tax changes. Well, so, we've been saying that for a while, that people are moving out because of Connecticut's high taxes. So now you have all these people saying, "Oh, yeah, that's true. People might leave because their taxes are going up in Connecticut."
Well, the other way to think about this is, the tax changes were really complicated, but one of their goals was to double the standard deduction so that fewer people would itemize. So now the number of people who are going to be looking to deduct their SALT is going to be a smaller group. It's going to be a smaller, slightly higher income group because the number of people who can avail themselves of a standard
That's
deduction.
right. So really you're talking about high-income people. And it's interesting, the governor...
I can't believe the Yankee Institute is opposed to high-income people. It doesn't seem...
So we haven't taken a position on these state change. I think, personally, I'm going to say I think the whole charitable donation thing is a little ridiculous.
Well, it's just going to fail on its wackiness. We don't even have to discuss its merits, right? Because it's too wacky.
But I think it is what the blue state governors don't like is it's shining a very large spotlight on how high taxes are in these states. And Governor Malloy sent out a press release saying, our standard deduction for state and local taxes is $19,000. That's the average deduction. I mean, that's very high. We pay a lot of taxes here in Connecticut, and this issue is pointing that out.
All right, so I don't know. We've only got about 4 minutes to our break. Not even that, really. Maybe we could just introduce the casino thing. And I keep pointing out to you, Paz, to bring out these things. So there are all kinds of plots and subplots now going on with the casino. I don't know. Can you?
You want to do a reality TV series?
Yes, I do.
It's Casino Wars.
Where did the CTN people go?
Yeah.
Right. There's one.
All right. So, the short version is MGM is fighting on land, in the air, on the sea, to make sure the two tribes don't build a casino on the doorstep of their new project, MGM's new project in Springfield. And they have bottled this thing up 6 different ways. They lost in the Connecticut General Assembly, which authorized the two tribes to build a casino in East Windsor to compete with Springfield. And it's all gone to hell for the tribes since then. The Department of the Interior has blocked this thing by refusing to accept amendments to the tribe's gaming agreements with the state.
I'll quibble with that in a minute.
Well,
but yeah,
but there's all anyway.
Right.
But the more interesting thing is, MGM has also opened this new front in Bridgeport. The question is this a big bluff? Do they really want to have the right to develop a casino in Bridgeport when New York City looks like it will be expanding casinos in the next 4 or 5 years? It seems that job one clearly is to kill the East Windsor project. The question now is, okay, if the state eventually decides to go for Bridgeport, will that be just sort of a happy byproduct for MGM? So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of money on the table. MGM has spent $5 million in the last 2 years just lobbying here. But, they've got $950 million invested in Springfield, and that's what they want to protect.
You have 2 minutes to quibble.
Well, I only wanted to quibble with the issue of the lawsuit and whether or not the Department of the Interior has really quashed this. I mean, what the stories have been saying is that when you negotiate amendments to a compact between the state and the Indians, you have to submit the amendments to the BIA or the Interior Department. And the law says that the secretary, Zinke in this case, has 45 days to act. And if he doesn't act, it's deemed approved. So he didn't act. And I've spoken with tribal law experts, and their position unequivocally has been the failure to act means that the amendments were deemed approved. So why Connecticut felt that it was necessary to go ahead and file a lawsuit against the Department of Interior is unclear to me.
Well, the short answer is Connecticut wants 100% guarantee that its existing revenue sharing with the tribes on slots will not be jeopardized by anything that happens by the Trump administration in Washington. So there's a trust factor. So part of the authorization that Connecticut gave to the tribes required that the Department of the Interior says, guys, here's your guarantee. Your slots revenue is intact. So by not doing that, and I understand the rationale that they don't need to, but under Connecticut law, that's a requirement for this project to go forward. By the way, even if this is resolved, there are many other problems. Yeah. MGM is going to sue, claiming that the legislature, in doing what no legislature has ever done, which is grant a commercial casino license to somebody through direct legislative action, in and of itself is unconstitutional. Now, of course, there were reasons to do that here because the Connecticut is in league with it has a partnership with the tribes anyway.
All right, we got to go to a break here. When we come back, Suzanne and I will tell you what we think about casinos and other kinds of cliffhangery stuff. I guess that's not a good cliffhanger. Nobody really cares what we think about casinos, do they? No. It's a very small percentage. Yeah. Welcome back to the Wheelhouse. I want to, first of all, hand out some credit for getting the show on the air today. Katie Dolarski is the key to everything here at this radio station. But today she's running the board because Kyone Wolf is off. Meanwhile, we are introducing, internally anyway, and you will reap the benefits of his presence, Scott Breedy, who will be eventually producing the Wheelhouse. And this is his first day at work here. He's not officially the producer of the Wheelhouse yet. I think he has to go through. Mr. Dankosky has to come back, and we have an initiation. He has to put his hand in really hot beef stew. And stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff he's got to do. But still, it's like we're excited to have Scott here in the house. Garnett McLaughlin is our intern today, and I think that's sort of everybody. But so anyway, we don't have John, and it looks like Liz. Are you doing something in there, or are you just hiding? Yeah, so Carmen Baskoff is in there doing something too. So we don't have John, we don't have Wolfie, but I think things are going swimmingly here, if I do say so myself. And part of that is due to the excellent panel that we have here today. Mark Pasniok is Capitol Bureau Chief of the Connecticut Mirror, Suzanne Bates, Policy Director at the Yankee Institute, Dan Clow, lawyer in Hartford, bear hunting advocate, and blogs at appealinglybrief.com, also a recording star as well. Do you have any music out these days?
I do. I have the Donald Trump Nightmare Blues out.
How can we get that?
We
already have we have the syndrome. I'm just asking how we get the recorded music.
You can check it out on my website very soon.
Appealing. Okay, well, it'll be up there fairly soon. All right, so
you can't play a cut now.
Bad planning. When Scott Breedy takes over here, Dan is going to be in heavy rotation.
I saw a guitar in the next studio.
All right.
Absolutely. Wolfie has a copy of it.
No, they're counting on me for once not to have the show devolve into chaos.
Okay.
So if it devolves into chaos, that will confirm everybody's worst suspicions about me. So let's try to avoid that. So there's a few things going on politically. I guess maybe we could begin with, it's sort of it's a story that didn't happen rather than did, but Suzanne Bates, Themis Claridus, ending long speculation that she might be running for governor. She's not running for governor. I don't know. You're not surprised, are you?
I was a little surprised, but I guess what she decided was she'd rather be Speaker of the House. That's her goal now, instead of being governor. So I think there were already a lot of people in the field. She decided not to jump in. I think there were a lot of people in the field who were worried about her jumping in. Because they felt like she might take it. But
If she had jumped in, Paz would have had to like get an extra spreadsheet because like is your spreadsheet totally maxed out now? Don't you keep a spreadsheet?
No.
It can just go forever.
Yeah, you keep adding to it. It's okay. It's all right. Don't worry about me.
Right. So don't hesitate to jump into the governor's race. If you're sitting here listening and you're thinking, why shouldn't I run for governor? That's not a good reason. Well, I mean, in a way, Claritas is in an interesting position because, yes, she'd probably rather be Speaker of the House. I mean, if you read the tea leaves of the 2017 election, you don't necessarily see, to the extent that it sends any signals at all, you don't necessarily see Republicans picking up seats in the General Assembly, which would be a necessity.
The Republicans have been on an incredible winning streak since having a god-awful election night in 2008 here. And the question is, has Donald Trump so muddied the waters that when people look at what ticks them off more, Dan Malloy and the fiscal state of Connecticut, or Donald Trump and the overall state of political discourse in the United States, which will be dominant? And over the short term, the Democrats feel the wind is changed and it's at their backs. Now, whether this will play out all summer and into the fall, who knows? But there's a lot of energy in the Democratic base, thanks to Donald Trump. There are a lot of women coming forth, mainly on the Democratic side, who are volunteering for campaigns and in many cases actually deciding they're going to run. So before the Trump election, I would have been fairly confident in saying this is going to be a continuation of a Republican trend on the state level. Obviously, and then, by the way, there's been national press that seems to be surprised that blue Connecticut is in play for governor. That's not news. Republicans have been competitive for governor in every election. The last time they weren't was 1986. So forget that. But anyway, so that's sort of the dynamic. So in the case of Themis Claritas, neither one is sort of a safe thing. And by the way, Themis Claritas has high profile in our world, but there's a long, long history of noting that legislative leaders really don't have much profile outside the Capitol, and there's really no history of them jumping into statewide races and clearing the field or otherwise doing well.
Let me just quickly stay with you for a second, Paz, because I think the other thing that we're seeing, looks like we're going to see a bunch of primaries, not just at the top of the ticket, but it's starting to look more and more like, in state legislative races and some of the constitutional officers. It's beginning to look like Denise Merrill, Secretary of State. You just reported on somebody new who's got an exploratory move that could conceivably result in there are a couple of people floating around on the Democratic side at the Secretary of State level, right?
Yeah, but so there's a little subplot to that, and that is Connecticut has never elected Hispanic to statewide office, and the question is, can the powers that be, whoever they really are at this point, because in the era of direct primaries, it's hard to have powers that be that actually help negotiate slates. But there's an effort to see if you can get a Hispanic candidate in the statewide ticket. And a couple people seem to be targeting Denise Merrill. It's an interesting choice in that, she lives in Hartford now, but, her political base is Eastern Connecticut. So that in the year of the white suburban woman, are the Democrats going to try to knock off the last white suburban woman on the ticket?
Right, and typically you don't go after one of your incumbents. I mean, there are things that are open, like Attorney General and
there are a lot of things that are open. Everything except Comptroller and Secretary of State.
So that's the one they're going after. So we're going to have to. Did you have something?
Well, just to point out that Art Linares, a Hispanic, is running on the Republican side for state treasurer. So it could be.
Is he also running for his seat? Is he also running for his seat too? Can he?
No, he's
not. He's vacating that seat.
Yeah. He wants to live with his wife. He is married to a Democratic state rep from Stanford. So right now, it is very awkward for them personally. So by Art Linares for running for statewide office, I think he's doing it for love.
Oh, okay, that's beautiful.
That's great.
See, I wish we had that song too.
And I'm going to get such grief at the Capitol today from Art Linares and Carolyn Simmons as well.
Plus, Dan is going to write a song about it.
Yeah,
so we're speed dating through a whole bunch of topics here, Dan. But I know one thing that you wanted to talk about, and I do too. So in an election year, a lot of things become potential election issues. In some ways, during the session, you don't want to create too much grist for the mill that could be used against you. But it does seem as though at least a few of the Republican contenders for governor have their eye on the confirmation of Andrew McDonald as Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court. So I don't know. Give me your take on this.
Well, it's not just the contenders for government, although Herbst has been, I think, one of the most vocal in raising questions about.
That's Tim Herbst.
Tim Herbst.
President of UConn has no position on this right now.
Tim Herbst, yes.
That we know of.
That we know of, yeah.
So, but here's the issue, and there are a lot of rumors going on. I'm not going to repeat rumors. I'm just going to talk about what I know, which is this. So Andrew McDonald was confirmed overwhelmingly by the General Assembly when he was first nominated by Governor Malloy to become a justice of the Supreme Court. Right? But Andrew McDonald is also the individual who many Republicans believe was responsible for blocking the elevation of Justice Peter Zarella to become Chief Justice. This was after a bit of a debacle involving the withholding of a decision when Zarella was being nominated. So there's a little element of payback that might be going on here.
Yeah, we should say. So Andrew Sullivan was a state senator at that time.
Yes, at that time, Sullivan was the state senator. Andrew McDonald was the state senator.
Taco Sullivan was our Chief Justice at that time.
Right. He was state senator from Stanford and the very powerful co-chair of the Judiciary Committee, along with Mike Lawler at the time. So there's some element of that where I think some Republicans want to take this opportunity to run Justice McDonald through the ringer as a little bit of payback. But there's also another question that's on their mind, and it has to do with the way he voted in the death penalty case, the case that struck down the death penalty. And they have some questions about his decision, about his reasoning, and there's also a question as to whether or not he really should have sat on the case at all. The argument is that he was involved in the drafting of the legislation and giving opinions on the legislation when he was Governor Malloy's legal counsel. He actually drafted a very similar bill when he was still in the Senate. And the question is, should he, by virtue of those actions, have recused himself from the actual case once he was on the court? So I think these are some questions that the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee intend to ask Justice McDonald in his nomination hearings.
Although it's also being reported, Suzanne, that just they're sort of having the Merrick Garland problem. They're thinking, well, so then it's going to be 8 years before we get to have this conversation again. Why should we let a governor whose clock is running out make this appointment?
You're not hearing that from within the legislature. Those are a couple of candidates running for governor who've made that suggestion. So I don't know that that's
and Tim Herbst.
Yeah, I don't know that that's an idea that's gaining traction. I do think there's one more area though where people have raised concerns, and that's when McDonald was in the legislature, he had a bill out that would have seen the state take over part of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
I mean, that's
not exactly.
Well, so I mean, still raise some very serious concerns regarding sort of religious liberty issues.
People will be surprised that under state law dictates the governance policies for churches in Connecticut, including the Catholic Church. And there was, as a result of embezzlement in southern Connecticut, there was an effort to actually, yes, give parishioners more control over Catholic Church finances. It was a political debacle, and
and it should have been. But I mean, the fact that someone who is now sitting on our state Supreme Court, who had raised a bill, that had some serious constitutional issues, I think will probably come up in the hearings as well.
It will. But the funny thing is, it is initial confirmation. I mean, that was that was sort of fair game then. Will he be a partisan? Will he be an advocate? And the decision of the General Assembly was, no, we think he's mature enough to be different as a justice. So the issue now is, what is different about him being promoted to Chief Justice? And also, there is now a track record. The death penalty case was not written by him, but he was party to it. And even people who are opposed to the death penalty will say it was an odd decision in some ways as far as the justification. That's a whole nother long conversation.
That's a whole long show, right.
But I mean, I think Paz's point is an important one, which is if they wanted to knock off Andrew McDonald based on things he'd done as a state legislator, they had their chance.
That's true. And the votes show that at that initial confirmation that they were satisfied with his responses. I mean, it was 131, I think, to 1.
Yeah, and I think there were 3 no votes in the Senate.
Right.
But here's here's the thing. One of the differences is legislators, when you're looking at sort of destroying someone's career or blocking someone's career, it's a different burden. In this case, it's a promotion. At the end of the day, if they block his promotion, Andrew McDonald remains a justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court.
Right.
And the question is, will that free some Republican legislators to be more aggressive in a way that they weren't when it came to his initial appointment? And I think that's one of the open questions here.
Did you have one more thing you want to say? You were cocking your head. All right. There's only 2 minutes left, so we're not going to talk about the memo because we can't do that in 2 minutes, even though Dan and I are so locked and loaded to do this. I think maybe we should let's end with something kind of cute, which is like, okay, if say you're running for governor and boy, you'd like to I always get earned media and unearned media mixed up. Don't you do you get that mixed up?
Yes, and because it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So,
if you're in a Super Bowl commercial because that you had a brain operation, is that earned media? Anyway.
The hard way. Yes, earned media the hard way. That's how I'm describing it.
It feels like earned media to me. Anyway, Mark Boughton, as most people know, had brain surgery to remove a benign tumor that was reported to be the size of a lemon. None of that sounds like any fun. But he's in a Super Bowl commercial. So that's pretty good, right?
Yeah. I didn't see it. Sorry.
Did you not watch the Super Bowl?
It's a good commercial.
I did watch the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Is it a good?
It was great. Oh yeah, wow, terrific commercial. I mean, just well done commercial.
Well, and it's a commercial. Elements of that can be used in a race for governor because it humanizes him. He talks about looking death in the face. Of one point they said you may never speak again. By the way, I just for the record, the use of the word benign should never be used in the same sentence with a tumor. I understand why medical people say that, but there ain't nothing benign about removing a lemon from your skull.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So anyway, we should say it's a Super Bowl commercial for the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center where, in fact, he had that surgery. And he has said that he had a kind of epiphany there. And so we may even be dealing with a different Mark Boughton than the one we've always known. Although we've sort of loved the one that we already had. We don't have to.
He still tweets.
He still thinks we should get rid of the state income tax.
Does he still tweet about The Walking Dead? All right, so I guess we're done. I could just go on and on. But there's music playing. So we're done. Thanks very much to Suzanne Bates and Mark Pasniokis and Dan Clow. And
Thank
here
you.
come some nice people to ask you to pledge.